Hello, my friends. I had to take a few moments and reflect on why I do what I do here. And I'm wearing my Army hat today because it's Memorial Day. Well, tomorrow's Memorial Day, and I'm thinking a lot about memories. And one of the memories I have is when I first started doing these monthly podcasts for the Differently Abled Network meeting. And I thank you all so much for being so supportive. But I want you to know that I do this because I'm hoping that some of the things that I say will help people to be successful in life, successful in the workforce, successful in the classroom. And so I'm happy to be here this morning. Welcome to the Differently Abled Network meeting. It's sponsored by Ask Dr. Applewhite program. And I want to give special thanks today for the people that helped me pull this thing together because it's really a job. So thank you so much to Rosalind Beeler and Lori Elward and Morgan Gawlock and our dear friend Doug Reynolds, our Air Force veteran. So I welcome you. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, go ahead. Okay, is what we're featuring today. And of course, we always ask for the people that are with us. They're members of the Differently Abled Network, and they have something to say about the topic. So I'll be asking you questions, and if you feel like answering back and responding, that'll be great. If you don't, that's okay too. But I'm gonna ask you how you feel about how to manage trauma triggers in the workplace or the classroom or life. We're also going to hear voices from men and women veterans, and that's going to be exciting to hear their take on trauma triggers. And of course, we always close each program with the differently abled artists and musicians, and that's for healing purposes because we talk about a lot of subjects that are very, very traumatic for people. And so the healing process is very, very important. And I can't think of a better way for people to heal than through art and music. And we have a very, very special guest today to join us, Cindy Green, who is a healing arts practitioner, give us some really great ideas on how to manage trauma triggers. I'm Dr. Danita Applewhite, and a lot of people affectionately call me Dr. Apple. I served in the United States Army at Fort Lee, Virginia Quartermaster School. I was an instructor there. And that's what set me on a path for what I do right now, because I work with a lot of underserved soldiers that were actually at the edge of being kicked out of the military because they couldn't pass certain exams. And so I learned a lot about how culture and ethnicity, history of an individual plays a big part in their perception of what they can accomplish. And that has led me over 40 years in this practice. I'm a retired certified rehabilitation counselor and also served as an independent living counselor. My background has led me to serve on governor's councils for many, many years and sharing my wisdom, my God-given wisdom, if you will. I hope that you'll enjoy some of the YouTube videos that have been made. They're on YouTube at Ask Dr. Applewhite. So that'll be at the bottom of your screen, and also we'll talk about that a little later. I want to tell you a little bit about the Differently Abled Network and the factor that Ask Dr. Applewhite sponsors it. It's a program of White Apple Institute, a nonprofit 501c3. And the reason why that's so important is I want to tell you how it developed. In 2017, the Differently Abled Network was a compilation of community business partners who got together and said, that they wanted to support people with disabilities that were trying to succeed in the workforce, in the classroom, especially our veterans. I'm a differently abled person with a disability. And one of the things that I've done, and you can go to the next, okay? One of the things that I've done is I've looked at the non-visible disabilities as well as visible disabilities. And one of the things I help people do is not to define themselves by their disability, but to define themselves by who they really are. And that means that when I shake your hand or I meet you, that the first thing out of my mouth is not how disabled I am or that I am disabled. The first thing out of my mouth is what I can do, not what I cannot do. So that's what defines the people of the differently abled network. And also that we've changed our perception. We haven't changed the word disabled because we need that word disabled for insurance reasons, for medical visits. But we understand that we're not defined by our disability yet, and that we have changed our perception of what disabled actually means. So we go back to the early dictionaries. Disabled actually means, from Merriam-Webster, as a matter of fact, in the dictionary, it says unable to produce, unable to work. And that is not true, as most of you know. So what can you do? Well, a couple of things that you can do to help us out here. One of the things that we make a priority with the Differently Able Network is that when people are trying to get to an exam or trying to get to a job interview and their transportation fails, or the babysitter doesn't show up, or their exam fees that they didn't expect or that they couldn't pay, we use your donation to pay for those expenses. And believe me, we vet the individual. We make sure that the individual is telling us the truth by getting their transcripts and all kinds of different things that we do. But the most important thing I want you to remember about this is that your donation of any amount will really help in helping people to get to that job interview or that exam that they need to get to. And that so many times the failure to get to those things pushes us back and makes us fail in life. It makes us lose hope. And one of the things that we want to do in the Differently Able Network is to restore hope. So again, subscribing to our channel is a big thing. And volunteering. Volunteering, if you want to volunteer your time, we use remote access to do our outreach. So we had a little accident there. One of the things that's not so important when I look at our topic for today, how to manage trauma triggers. Okay. I think of this song, The Way We Were, by Barbra Streisand. And the song Barbra Streisand sang was so important because it brought out the statement, memories are so beautiful, maybe beautiful and yet, but what's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget. And I emphasize the word choose because I want you, if you're dealing with trauma triggers at all in your life, if you've ever had to deal with experiencing a traumatic event, even in a nightmare, you can understand that it's pretty painful. A lot of psychological suffering to go through, and I'm trying to understand why it's coming up from something in your childhood, maybe, or something that happened years ago. So we thank Barbra Streisand for that song, The Way We Were. So let's get into our topic a little bit here. Why I choose the topic is because today I was asked to do a Memorial Day speech. And that brought back a lot of memories for me of my own traumatic triggers, trauma triggers. One of them being my daughter's death by gun violence some years ago. And every single birthday, I celebrate her birthday and honor her life. But it still brings up trauma triggers for me about the way she passed. And it makes me more sensitive to many of the families that have undergone losing somebody, especially someone who fought for the country, fought for our country, and fought for our freedom. So it means a lot to me to talk about trauma triggers today. Another reason why I chose this topic is because there's an increase in people experiencing trauma triggers. And I just wanted to share a few of them with you. John, for instance, has problems with his immediate supervisor because the immediate supervisor reminds him of an abusive father, okay? And it stops him from moving forward in his position. He won't go and ask for a promotion because he feels a sense of helplessness. Then we have Myrtle, who's a 32-year-old veteran who feels uncomfortable at a recent job interview. And this is real important. The way that she handled this is the way that I hope that if I had done this broadcast earlier, that maybe she would have gained some knowledge and not walked out of the room because of the fact that the interviewer reminded her of a colonel in the United States Army that she was in. And that colonel did not acknowledge military sexual trauma, her military sexual trauma claim. And so the interviewer in this specific job interview reminded her of this individual, and it brought up all kinds of stuff for her, and she had to leave the interview. So when it starts to interfere, when trauma triggers start to interfere in your life, that's when we have to move to looking at the possibility that the trauma trigger could be leading us to PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But hold on to that thought for a minute, because I want to tell you about Joan. Joan, she's 40 years old and a mother of 3, and she sits with her back to the wall pretty much in every circumstance, even in restaurants. But in the classroom, that's when I notice it the most. And the reason why she did 2 tours in Afghanistan, and during that time, she learned her body, encoded the memories of the bombs bursting, even though she wasn't in direct hand-to-hand combat. But she still lives with that. And that's what trauma triggers do for us. They unfortunately live with us. And we have to find ways to adapt our life around them. So, can we erase memories? Can we erase the trauma trigger? Pretty much no. Science has tried, we've tried. But as I've taught my students for many years, I've taught psychology for many years, and this is one of the best subjects that I've taught, is about how the brain encodes everything that we do into what we call the short-term memory and then into long-term memory. And just like a computer, just like a hard drive on a computer, if you can imagine that for a minute, you can delete things from the computer, but you can't delete it totally. You have to actually destroy the hard drive in order to delete totally. Do you agree, Morgan? You agree with that, don't you? You have to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have to delete the whole thing. And so the device has to be destroyed, and that would mean that our brain would have to be destroyed in order to totally wipe out all memories, that's what triggers are, trauma triggers or natural triggers. And I'll talk about natural triggers in a minute. There's certain drugs and therapies that have worked to help us suppress memories and to minimize the experience of having a trauma trigger. Let's talk about for a minute, let's just define so we're on the same page here, what trauma trigger is versus a natural trigger. And a natural trigger would be, of course, that you remember something, that you remember an event, somebody's birthday, for instance. Okay, that's not traumatic for you unless, of course, your perception of that trigger makes it traumatic for you. Because a trauma trigger in itself are memories of traumatic experiences that cause us to react physically and emotionally. But the difference between a natural trigger that we all have all the time is that is our perception of it, and a perception causing us a lot of psychological pain and suffering. So did I define that pretty much? That sound good for all of you? Consuelo?
Yes.
Yeah, you got that pretty much? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. So we have to distinguish between natural triggers and traumatic triggers in our environment, because they come from us internally, inside of us, from places that we don't even recognize, okay, within our brain, and reminds us of things. Our memories come up. And then we have the traumatic triggers that come from all kinds of terrifying experiences that we've had in our life. You know, some of the symptoms of PTSD and trauma triggers. Trauma triggers are part of PTSD. And so it doesn't necessarily mean, though, and I'm going to say this again later on, it doesn't necessarily mean that because you have a trauma trigger that you have PTSD. Trauma triggers can result in a diagnosis of PTSD, which is, let's define that for a minute. PTSD is a mental health condition that can develop after a person has experienced or witnessed a terrifying event. And so when we think about our three people that I noted, Joan, Myrtle, and John, they witnessed a terrifying event in their life. And so that stays with them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have PTSD. What defines PTSD many times is how severe the trauma trigger is, how severe it is, how frequent it is, and how long it lasts. Okay, those are the three ways that we really determine whether or not it's PTSD and needs intervention by therapy and medication. Some of the symptoms, and I thought that this was interesting, because when we have trauma triggers, we have some of the very similar symptoms that we have with PTSD. The trouble sleeping, trouble concentrating, flashbacks of the traumatic event that we went through in our childhood, in a religious experience that we've had, depression, irritability. And I bet if you've had any trauma triggers in your life, you can relate to some of these things. I thought social withdrawal was a really big thing. When we withdraw from people because of our trauma triggers, we don't want people to remind us of certain things. You know, you probably at one time or another in a classroom or in a workplace setting have run across somebody that just at the very, very beginning of your relationship with them, they seem to irritate you. Well, you don't know why. It could be because they remind you of someone or something that happened to you in your life. And that's what flashbacking is. It comes back to you, but you don't really know where it's coming from and how to really put it all together. And one of the other ways that we know we define trauma triggers to PTSD is in our self-destructive behaviors, being self-destructive in so many different ways, not just suicidal, but suicide is one of them. One of the things I found also in my research, because I want to get to how to manage trauma triggers more than anything here, is noticing our physical condition. I myself had many trauma triggers from my childhood and different things that happened to me. And I received a diagnosis of PTSD. And the therapeutic intervention from professional help really, really helped me. And so I'm not against you going to therapy to work out things, but I want you to be careful that you don't use the trauma trigger itself as the only reason. You look at all the symptoms and you talk to someone about it before you make that decision, before you start diagnosing yourself or diagnosing others. It's real important. Don't you agree, Cindy? We get into the habit of diagnosing ourselves based on Dr. Google, okay? Anyway, I wanted to also bring out, how big of an umbrella PTSD is. and so many different forms of PTSD. I had mentioned religious trauma, but there's I went all the way back to the Holocaust on concentration issues. People had tremendous, terrifying experiences in the Holocaust, and for post-traumatic stress, post-traumatic slave syndrome, which is where African Americans, because of their history and the color of their skin, suffered traumatic experiences. And so there's different forms like historical trauma, the colonization of Native Americans, all kinds of different forms of PTSD that we have to be aware of when we start making those decisions about whether or not we have PTSD or somebody else does. We don't really know where it comes from and where it can lead to if we are not careful of how we approach a person. So now we get into managing trauma triggers. And this is where I'm going to start asking you to come back at me and then let me know whether or not any of these things make sense to you. Because one of the things that I know for fact is that we have to agree to adapt. We have to agree to adapt to our trauma triggers. That means that when we're in a workplace environment or classroom or around people, period, that we have to learn how to remind ourselves that we're safe in the environment that we're in right now, and that what we're experiencing is from our past. So there's a number of things that I've used myself and that I've asked other people to use, suggested, recommended, and it's really worked. So I want to go through a few of them with you. Identifying our true self and getting into self-awareness is, of course, very, very important. But I thought that in order to really do that, we need to videotape or journal. The reason why I brought up videotaping is that that's what I use to journal myself, because I'm not into the writing. Anybody else do any journaling or any journaling at all, or any suggestions of journaling? Anybody else?
I journal all the time. I've been
You
journaling
journal?
since I was
Okay,
about.
and you're
I
able
journal
to,
as well.
yeah, and you write it out.
Yes, yes.
I
Yes.
journal as well.
Mm-hmm. Because I'm just not good at writing it out. I videotape myself and then I listen to it again, and it works the same. So if you're not into journaling, videotaping is another way we do it. You know, I have pets, and I take time with my pets and hobbies, and that's another way that we can. Of course, you can't do that with when you're on the job, but that's another way we can do it when we get home. After we learn how to adapt to the process. And of course, you can't beat playing calming or joyful music. There's some other ones I want to bring out. Here they are. The reader work on games and puzzles. And this is some research that I've done. It's not just me, that just my own therapeutic intervention that I'm doing, my own techniques. These are techniques that I share with others, but this one is really, really one that really helps a lot. The 5-4-3-2-1 method, and that's where you stop concentrating. You try your best by adapting. You try your best to adjust to thinking of 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can touch. And by the time that you can taste, by the time you finish doing all of that, believe me, the trauma trigger is over.
Danita,
Yes.
Dr. White, I had a suggestion that was told to me about this 5-4-3-2-1 to make
Yes.
a little kit that you carry with you that has a picture or something that has a texture that you can touch, something you can hear like shaking a rattle.
Yes.
Essential oils or lemon drop to take.
Oh,
So you have it all right there.
Yes. Very,
Yeah.
very
You
important.
don't have to imagine it. It's there.
Yeah,
It's,
can it right. Yeah.
yeah.
If you bring it with you. And you can bring those things with you on the job. Okay. On the job, in the classroom. You can bring them with you. You don't have to wait until you get home to do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that out. Anyone else have anything else that they would like to say about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method? Rosalind, you're here. Anything that you want to share about
Yes,
trauma triggers?
yes, I am.
Mhm.
One of the things that I do is I journal, but not only do I journal, I write down the things that I may have seen. I may write down things that I've touched.
Mm,
I might like hearing a song, um, even singing along with that song when I hear
yes.
it, and then wondering how did it make me feel when I was singing that song? Did it remind me of something?
Mm-hmm.
Smelling lavender. I love the smell of lavender and
Mm.
peppermint. And I love the taste of honey. Yeah, just the
Very, very,
honey.
very good. The taste of honey.
Yes.
That's wonderful because there's an actual song, Taste of Honey, right, Lori? Yeah,
Tastes much sweeter than wine.
right. Much sweeter than wine. And and you, I know you can relate to breathing deeply. That's another one that we can use for to overcome a trauma trigger when it happens. Okay, is
Um,
breathing, inhaling through your nose. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry to say that all I do is chocolate.
Say that once more.
I'm so sorry to say that all I do of all this we've been talking, I do
Mm-hmm.
chocolate.
Ah,
I'm addicted to chocolate, actually.
chocolate is great.
It's a good taste. There's
Nothing
also
like chocolate.
with the deep breathing, if you inhale and then as you exhale, do a little sigh to make
Mm-hmm.
that little bit of sound can really make a difference. So you might try
Yeah,
that.
Lori, it does. It does. And to make sure that we're breathing in through our nose and out through our mouth. Very, very important. Important for the process in itself to go through. There's some more that I want to share with you. Just a few more. And that is to practice mindfulness and meditation techniques. And, without going into a lot of detail, because we don't have a lot of time to do that, but you can look up those things, or you can always call me at 888-562-7753. That's actually converts to 888-56-APPLE. And you can actually text or call me, and I'll give you some of the research that I've done on this, and I'll share that with you. For me, one of my greatest things is watching a movie. Watching a movie that brings me joy. I have a whole list of movies that are so important for me when trauma triggers come up for me. Anybody else watch movies that helps them?
I do.
I
You
do.
do?
Yeah. A funny movie sometimes or a sweet movie, but
Right.
sometimes a funny movie when I'm really down, a funny movie laughter can pull you right out of a lot of things, or at least lift you a little bit.
Mhm.
When you're down, is that because of a trauma trigger, something that comes up in your memory that's painful for you?
Often.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what does it. That's what makes it so important that we have to have these techniques next to us, close to us, that we have to remember that again, that we're in a safe place. Um, I always say this to people, and it gets misinterpreted many times, that we need to create a safe plan, and a safe plan identifying people and places you can be around when you feel that these trauma triggers are coming on. John, for instance, with the factor that his boss reminds him of his abusive father. That's a very, very hard thing to get around because he's working with him every day. But again, some of these techniques will work for him to overcome thinking about his abusive father and knowing that he's in a safe place, and surrounding himself around people that he feels safe with. That goes for all three of the people that I, I, I noted. But I caution you to be careful, if you're in a workplace or any classroom, any place where you have to trust people. Be careful of who you're trusting. What are some of the ways that we can make sure that we're trusting people? I mean, that's a hard sell, isn't it? When you think about it. Anybody a hard sell on trying to create a safe place? Have you ever done that, any of you?
I have to some degree, and trust is a tricky issue for me. I have a lot of trauma triggers that have caused me to be untrusting of people. So for me, it just takes time and being with the person a little bit and just seeing where things go before I'm going to open up and tell them my life story. Right.
Because that's really, you can't just say, let me be around you so that I can feel safe. They want to know, they want to know why. Rosalind, you had something you wanted to share?
I have a differently disabled condition.
Yes.
But there are times that it shows up on my face. And when it shows up on my face, people are very concerned. They're concerned about how I feel. They're concerned about my safety. And so I had to learn those people in that workspace to go ahead and share with a couple of people what is physically going on, and then say, you know what, today I need to excuse myself because it's showing on my face.
Yes. Right.
And so I created a safe space, but I learned to kind of identify what was going on. And then I gave my self permission.
Yeah. See, that's very, very important to give yourself permission to move on, to adapt, to learn, to accept that. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing that, all of you sharing your feelings about this. One of the things I want to leave you with before we bring on our guest is that something that NAMI says, and it says to remember that seeking professional support is a sign of strength and significantly aids in the healing process. Okay. I don't know if Dr. Jane is here because I'm ready to go into the veterans feature, and I really want to talk about at least a couple of these things: childhood sexual trauma and military sexual trauma, how important those things are when we're dealing with our fellow veterans. Hello, Dr. Jane. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Dr. Jane is an Army veteran, educator, researcher, and the co-owner of Reintegrate. She's also a White Apple Institute board member. And we thank you for your service this morning. Okay.
Morning, everybody.
A little bit about what you know about trauma triggers, and I'm sure you heard some of the things that I've been saying already.
Yeah, I think hi everybody, first of all.
Hi.
It's good to be on, and thank you for having me as well. And thank you for the insight that the other guests have brought to the conversation. I think one of the important conversations that needs to be brought to the forefront is, why does a person join the military? Why does a woman join the military? And a lot of times, one of the reasons why they decide to serve is because they're trying to it's an attempt to leave whatever situation they had at home.
That's right.
And yes, and so some of it is incest, some of it is child molestation, and so forth. And so they're entering the armed forces with that background.
Predisposed.
Yeah, and so there's that predisposition already. And I don't remember what the percentage is, because I haven't seen it on paper yet. I haven't seen the percentage yet on paper. However, I do know that that is one of the reasons why people join,
Yes.
especially women. So another reason why women join is the opportunities that they are going to have.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of women express the fact that as a service member and they're in the military, they experience the opportunity for promotion, the experience, because then it's kind of blanket across the board. We get
Mm-hmm.
promoted accordingly for the most part. And so the opportunities that we may have as service members in the military, we may not have in the civilian world.
Uh-huh. Right. Right. Exactly. And that predisposition is very, very, very important when I say that, because I work with so many people that their trauma is based on usually childhood sexual trauma, something that happened in their childhood, and it still keeps coming up and up. And many times it's built. Other experiences happen that kind of like build up that trauma experience. You agree?
Yes, I
Mm-hmm.
agree. Because what people don't realize, and we don't, I don't think it doesn't crystallize in our minds until we're in that environment. Serving is that this organization will not save you. It is not there to save, right?
Mm-hmm.
The armed forces in psychology, we call it greedy institutions. So it's like law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
firefighting, because then when everybody is running out, we are running in.
Mm.
And the armed forces, you're expected to give all
Right.
the way up to your life.
Right.
We
Exactly.
call that greedy institutions. And
Mm-hmm.
so individuals enter these organizations with the expectation that they're going to be saved by these organizations. But because it is a closed system, when there is assault, sexual assault, and so forth, it's hard for them to report it. The chain of command doesn't respond as they should. And, the armed forces have made some significant strides
Yes, they have.
in making sure that anybody, both men or women, because
Right.
there are men who are also assaulted, can report without retaliation and so forth. And so they've made the effort to make sure that that happens now, but that wasn't
Right.
always the case.
When we look back at, and I mentioned one of the women that I've worked with, that sits with her back against the wall, and I'm sure you've heard of other instances like that. Um, it's hard to overcome that, but I found that it was built on other fears that she had as a child. Okay. And so we find that, and one of the women that I know that was diagnosed with PTSD, and in the future of that military sexual trauma. But one of the things that she was afraid of is talking about what had happened to her prior to the service. She said, well, if I do that, then it becomes a pre-existing condition, and I
Right.
can't get my benefits. I can't get the recognition for the military sexual trauma. I don't know if
Yes,
you've ever run across that, but that's pretty bad when you
it
can't even
is.
talk about what happened before.
I've heard that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's an absolute fine line, but it speaks to a larger, I think, social problem
Mm-hmm.
of the presence or the value of girls and women, which is
Mm.
a larger social issue or challenge that we deal with, right? Because then, if this individual could not hold this conversation as a child, and then here she is now as adult, carrying that and then dealing with other things, we now have compounded trauma.
Mm-hmm. It's
And
piled up.
so, yeah, we have that buildup and where nothing is really being dealt with, but the individual has to live with all of that and also live with the nuances and And so it goes into all sorts of things, their ability to date, their ability to form deep, meaningful relationships.
Yes, I was just going to bring that
Um,
out. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes.
And then, even wanting to be sexually active.
Mm,
And so having those sexual disorders because they do not want to even engage in
right.
sexual activity with their partners. And so it's not just the person ultimately. There are these other issues surrounding that
Mm-hmm.
that I
Mm-hmm.
think the general public really is not aware of.
Right. Right. And we have talked before about the fact that um, not necessarily saying trauma triggers, but we were alluding to that, is that how much it impacts the family around us. Okay, our
Yes.
children, our parents, the people around us are affected by our trauma triggers, and so it's so important that we learn how to adapt, learn how to if it gets serious. And I don't know if you remember, I noted how to determine whether or not it's serious enough for us to take that trauma trigger and go and see someone about it. And that is how severe it is, and how frequent it is, and how long it lasts. Okay, those are the three things that I've noted, um, that really determine whether or not it becomes serious enough for us to consider PTSD.
Yes. And that's a huge piece, but I feel like even initiating the conversation or being willing to even have the conversation to
Mm,
begin with, period. Because some people do not even want to have the conversation about the experience that they're having. And so when you look at some individuals, the challenges they're facing, even with the weight that some people carry, sometimes the weight gain is not because of what they eat, but the weight gain is because of what is eating them.
mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Very important.
You know, the other piece that I think that people don't really think about is the impact of parental betrayal
Mm,
in this whole child molestation piece, um, because sometimes the parents know, sometimes the parents do not know.
right.
But there is a segment of the population where the parent is aware that
Mm-hmm,
the child was molested, but did nothing to protect the child. And
right.
so there's a level of betrayal there.
Mm-hmm,
And then they enter these organizations expecting the organization to save them. And
mm-hmm,
sometimes they are assaulted there in those organizations, and the chain of command does not do anything to help to intervene or protect that individual. And then we now have institutional betrayal. And
mm-hmm.
so they're, where the individual is experiencing different types of betrayal, but it's surrounding the same issue or challenge, sorry, that they were facing.
I think what you hit on was something that uh, Jay and I have discussed. Jay, are you there? Um, about vulnerability, placing ourselves in a vulnerable position. Okay, some of us do that unknowingly, and we set ourselves up for more abuse because of the vulnerability that we've already had from our past, and mostly from parents, either acknowledging or not, or ignoring. Let's just say ignoring the situation. Jay, you have something that you wanted to add?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Not at this point.
Okay. No, not right now.
Okay, all right,
Oh,
but
I'm here. I'm paying attention.
all right. Thank you so much for being here today, Bill. Consuelo, you had
Sure.
something you wanted to add?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. So What if you, as a young child, talking about parental dynamics, grow up with a parent that has PTSD?
Mm. And you're asking what happens to them?
Okay, so you have a parent that has PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
You grow up in this household where you see all of the symptoms, the non-sleeping, the the just
Irritability,
yeah,
right, yes.
all of
All
the things that go along with the PTSD.
mm-hmm. Well,
Then
it's
as you grow up, do you take that on into the workplace and into the classroom also?
absolutely, absolutely. If you haven't learned how to adapt to your circumstances, if you haven't acknowledged that you need help, that you need to do things that, like the way that we talked about ways to manage our trauma triggers, and if those things don't work, that we seek professional help. That's very, very important. My mother suffered from mental illness, and it was very difficult for me to grow up as a child watching her. As a matter of fact, later on, after in college, I learned that the reason why I studied psychology was because I wanted to understand my parents, and I think that it's a common thing. Dr. Jane, you have something more to add to that?
Yes, that's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
There are words to describe our experiences. And as a child, we don't know what those words are. We just know that these are our experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And as we are living our lives as adults, and we go to school and we listen to whatever podcast, whatever, and we learn the words to describe our experiences, it is at that time that we can fully make meaning of those experiences that we have. Because if we can't call a thing, we cannot give it meaning. And if
Mm,
we cannot give it meaning, then we don't fully comprehend and understand how it impacts our present. Does
absolutely.
that make sense? And so as a child living with parents who have PTSD, um, we or the child would have to take the time. Counseling is good, and recognizing what those things are. So counseling is good, and finding the right counselor is another piece.
Right. It's finding the
Um,
right counselor.
yeah,
Yes.
and it's the adult coming to the full realization of what those experiences are and making intentional conscious decision that this was as my experience, but I will choose to live differently going
Mm,
forward, because ultimately we have to own our lives, and we have to own the direction that we are taking our lives and that we are living with our children and so forth. And so we have to make that intentional decision.
mm-hmm.
This was my past, but
Right.
it's not going to be my future.
That's
And
right.
sometimes we need help in deciding that we're going to have a different future. And we also may need help into putting the pieces together to create a new future.
Oh, so
Yeah,
important.
yeah, because then it requires different skills. It
And
requires, you know, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
It requires me not responding to everything.
Mm-hmm.
It requires me to be open to listen and not jumping to conclusion. It requires me learning how to set boundaries and
Mm-hmm.
stand by it. It requires me to speak to the adults in my life, whether that's my parents or whatever, and having those uncomfortable conversations with them. It requires me to have those conversations with them. It
Yes.
requires me, if I have to ultimately set boundaries with those individuals, even though they are my parents, there are my aunts, there are my uncles, but for my own mental health, I have to set boundaries for me. And that's a hard stand.
And agreed with everything you're saying. And I have to go back to the word choose. At the very beginning, I talked about memories are so beautiful, and yet what's so painful to remember, we choose to forget. It's about choice. It's about choice of all of the things that you're talking about. Whether or not we are going to make the choice to sit down and actually talk about it, whether we're going to make the choice to adapt. So it's very, very important, Rosalind, that if you're talking about yourself or you're talking about someone else that you know, to encourage them to make the choice. Okay, so we can move on here. And thank you so much, Dr. Jane, for your input there. Just a reminder, you can always help us to continue this podcast every month by making a donation to www.whiteappleinstitute.org. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Ask Dr. Applewhite. And don't forget, there's volunteer opportunities available. We gratefully acknowledge all of our guests today and our special sponsors that have made this possible today. Let's bring on the closure of our program today, which is our differently abled artists and musicians. And Lori has something, as our co-producer, Lori has something that she'd like to introduce to us. Lori, tell us a little bit about why you're even involved in this differently abled artists and musicians.
Well, this show frequently talks about pretty heavy things like we did today. And it's important that you take the steps that are given to heal and to move on with life. And I think that creativity and art and music and dance and anything that has to do with just using your right brain and letting yourself be creative. We're all incredibly creative, just that some of us don't tap into that as much as others. And people will say, oh, I'm not creative at all because they don't draw or sing or dance, but that's just not true. You can be a creative bookkeeper. You can be a creative anything. But we'd like to particularly highlight people in this time that are, as our guests, that have either experienced issues themselves or have family or friends who have done that. And I'm really pleased today to welcome a good friend of mine, Cindy Green, who is an excellent drummer and drum maker and a healer and a Native American flute player. And she just covers a big realm of various things that can be helpful and healing for people. So Cindy, thank you for being here today. And I'll pass you back to Dr. Apple.
Thank you.
Cindy?
Yes.
I'm so glad to have you here today. I want to introduce you as a healing arts practitioner. I just had to bring my djembe drum in just as a reminder to me how important it is, because drumming really helps me. This is my djembe drum. And in my relationship with you over the years, I've learned how important this is in the healing process. But you bring up more than just drumming. Your healing arts practice brings up conjures up ancient wisdom. Okay, and you're so spiritual. I just love being around you, and I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on how you feel that music drumming sounds help us to overcome the trauma triggers.
Okay, well, yes, I've worked with a lot of different ancient healing traditions. I've worked with curanderos and the shamanic practitioners and medicine people, but for me, the most important thing is the being aware. That's sometimes the most difficult, is being aware of our when something comes up to us, and like it sneaks up behind us, and all of a sudden we're like, you know, that's the awareness where the meditation, mindfulness, and meditation is really important. And so, my first experience with drumming was taking a class that's called drumming as a meditation,
Hmm.
which seems contradictory to drumming, you know. Oh, right?
Yes.
If you it brings, I have a little poem here. I'll just read my poem real quick. When I drum, my thinking stops. When I drum, my body slows down. When I drum, my heart relaxes. When I drum, I go to a fantastic place. When I drum, I go to a deep well of knowledge. When I drum, I meet my allies. When I drum, the world is a better place. When I drum, I can dance. When I drum, I can sit still. When I drum, I can sing. When I drum, I can be silent. When I drum, I can cry out. When I drum, I can laugh. When I drum, I can dream. And when I drum, I can awaken. When I drum, I can go anywhere. And when I drum, I can be grounded to this spot. When I drum, I can heal. When I drum, I am free. When I drum. So that about covers it all, I think.
Wow. Wow. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So it's all, it's awareness and meditation, mindfulness kind of thing when you actually start drumming. So what I like to do when I drum, which I have made a commitment to do that every morning, is get in touch with the drum and sound like this. And you can think about where it came from, how it was made, what kind of animal the skin is, what kind of tree. And then just take a deep breath through your nose and out your mouth. Do that a few times. And then you can start with the drumming. There's different rhythms for different people. Some people like a fast rhythm. It's interesting that sometimes if you have an anxiety kind of situation, a fast rhythm can help you calm down, which seems counterintuitive again. So I just start kind of with a slow heartbeat. And breathe in and breathe out. And it kind of, it's hard to think while you're drumming, I think.
You think about the drum. You think about the drum.
In your present moment.
In the present moment, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what you bring to me.
Yeah. And then if you're, it's also great for community, building community. If you have other people that you drum with, then you can get up and dance while you're drumming at the same time. And it creates closeness because when you're singing in a choir, everybody's saying the same thing and they're breathing at the same time. So it's called entrainment. So we're all here now. We're here. Our hearts are beating at the same time. If we're playing the same rhythm all the time, we just connect in that way. And that's really interesting because when you're with a group and everybody's drumming and you can feel the energy, it will come up and then it'll just all go down. Everybody, it's like really together. And then it gets real, it just stops. And without anybody saying, hey, it's time to stop. It's just a natural flow that we get as a community being together. So,
what I find is that as I admitted that I have experienced trauma triggers from my childhood, and I find that when drumming, it just doesn't come up. It just doesn't come up, and especially if you're in a supportive group. And I can't say enough about a support group. That's what the Differently Abled Network is. It's a support group of different people coming together with different abilities and sharing what they feel about the different topics that I've been given an inner wisdom to bring forth. And I really appreciate you sharing with us. You can get in touch with Cindy. Cindy, would you give us your telephone number for for drumming?
Yeah, you can text me is the best way is 480-299-4686. 4129. And I have a website. It's drumheart.com. And yeah, it's
Say that once more. Say your website once more for us.
Drumheart, like
Drumheart.
a beating heart. Yes. And I, we connect to our ancestral roots with the drum beat. I mean, all cultures had drumming,
Yes.
And when we come to America, when everybody came here and it wasn't happening anymore, actually it became illegal to drum in culture. Culturally, yeah, because they were afraid that, like in some of the slaves on the plantations, they would drum to communicate with some people far away, and then they didn't want them to do that, and it would scare them with the Native Americans that they were going to be having a war party or that kind of thing. So we're bringing it back, and it's good.
Right. It's so good.
Yeah.
So thank you. And before we leave, I just want to make sure that we have everybody has got a chance to talk about the trauma triggers and an appreciation for Cindy Green and for Dr. Jane Garcia coming to see us this morning. Is there anybody that has any final comments before I want to show you a video?
Me.
Please.
I want to get a drum because all of this is new to me. Where can I get one, and what kind would be the best? Because I imagine there are many different kinds and options. So maybe I will be getting in touch with Cindy. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I teach drum making workshops too, so you could make one.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's arranging a trip very soon to Sedona. And so that's something to Sedona, Arizona, something to get in touch with.
Wonderful.
Yes. If you're gonna, like I said, she's helped me a lot, and I want to show a short video of just some of the things that she does, and in closure, I would like to drum with you for a moment.
Okay.
Could you show that video, Lori? That was what was that? That was at Window Rock?
Yes, at the Navajo Museum. I used to be on the board of directors for the Gathering of Healers, and we went up every year and did that fun stuff.
Yeah, I can tell you that in that audience that the majority of people there have in some way, one way or the other, experienced trauma triggers. And we don't want to forget many of our veterans who deal with PTSD, many forms of PTSD that we discussed today. We want to thank them for their service. We don't know them all, but we owe them all. Okay, we had a chance, and I just want to say this in closing, that the fallen soldier fell for us so that we could stand up and celebrate. So if you're into celebrating for today, for a holiday, make sure you enjoy yourselves, but reflect on the purpose of the holiday itself. And we close now. Is that a good beat, suppose?
Thank you so much. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's good to meet everyone.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today.
Thanks.
Please make sure we have your email.
Yes, I put it in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Dr. Cheryl Schmidt, she left already. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank
Cindy.
Thank you, Lori. Bye-bye.
I'm gonna end the recording.
you.
Thank you.